friends and fellow citizens. We have used the last 20 years to some purpose. And I can say we are braced for the future. For 20 years, when external factors were favorable, we strengthened our internal conditions. A powerful American economy, oil in plentiful supply at low prices, enabled America and Europe and Japan to boom throughout the 1950s and 60s. Growth rates of between 6% to 8% for America and Europe, and over 10%, sometimes over 12% for Japan. And so world trade bounced along at 8 to 10% per annum. And we bounced along with it, with growth rates in the 60s and 70s of over 10% per annum. We educated our children, improved their health, built homes, built roads, power stations, harbors, airports, factories, offices, hotels, shopping complexes, all that you see of modern Singapore. We improved our social and our economic infrastructure, our assets. Now we are ready to reach out for higher levels of education, skills, and productivity. Let me pause and explain this simple word, productivity. You read about it, you hear about it. What does it mean? It encompasses a simple idea. And I can best illustrate this idea, say, by comparing what I myself saw, a Japanese shipyard and a British shipyard. I saw a British shipyard in 1967 on the Tyne near Newcastle. Swan Hunters, one of the best. I saw a Japanese shipyard around about that time, 67. IHI. And the contrast left me with a vivid impression I will not forget for the rest of my life. In one, there was a casualness and a gentlemanly approach to life. In the other was a bustle of a beehive, ceaseless work, effort, and not just blind effort. They were as computerized, as mechanized, as automated as the British were. And the British thought they were not. And each time they got into trouble, the same worker in Japan and in Britain produced different results. Not only was one a more productive worker in that he made tremendous efforts to give of his best, which is considerable because he's a hardworking, highly skilled person, but because of the organization and the cooperation within the factory and a keen management, always cutting costs, always improving methods of production, they were able to produce the same ship, the same oil tanker, in about 1/3 the time and 1/2, if not less than 1/2 the cost. So the British government bailed out, subsidized shipbuilder after shipbuilder. Finally, they decided to buy out the shipbuilders, nationalize them. How that solves the problem of productivity and world competition, I don't know. But I know that they're still losing, and I know that the Japanese still make half the world's total number of ships each year. But they are moving out of ships because they know that that's labor intensive, that the Koreans will come along, the Poles, and many others. And therein lies the lesson for us. Now we are ready to learn from those lessons. We have a society now with greater cohesion and less conflicts, as a sense of unity which binds us, as the progress and prosperity that our joint efforts have produced are shared and enjoyed by all. And we are better prepared to face the future. Never have ministers, MPs been closer to their ground. And there are younger men in the cabinet, in parliament, in the admin service, in the statutory boards, who are learning fast and who will ensure continuity. And we are ready for the turmoil of the 1980s. We are restructuring our economy to be trimmer and so able to meet the changed conditions. Let me give you a few examples of restructuring. We removed protective tariffs last year. 3 car assembly plants and 1 Bridgestone tire factory closed down. 1,500 workers were discharged and absorbed into other factories. There were 1,500 jobs protected by government, keeping non-competitive industries alive, using men in wrong jobs. Of course, we couldn't compete against tire manufacturers in Malaysia. There's a natural rubber producer, and the technology that was in the factory in Singapore and the value added was not high enough to overcome our comparative disadvantage. The Minister for Trade and Industry met Bridgestone, offered them 3 to 5 years, a graduated cut down to 0 tariff. They said, no, either you protect me forever or I close shop. And they were quite happy to close shop because they can take the same factory, move it to Malaysia, cheaper labor, cheaper rubber, more productive. And why should we not buy our tires from Malaysia, competing against probably as cheap, if not cheaper, tires from Japan, where they have automated their factory, their tire factory, to such a point that they can overcome the disadvantage of importing the rubber from Malaya into Japan and re-exporting it. That's what we mean by productivity and high technology. It is, put it in another way, because our workers are better educated and better paid, it is now no longer economically feasible for us to process or tin pineapples, coffee seeds, tapioca and sago. I remember them as a youth. going up Bukit Timah Way, pineapple canning factories. Now they've all closed down. The cleaning and processing of rubber. Number of people employed in the last few years have gone down by half. Workers in sawn timber and sawmilling gone down by half. A total of 4,500 workers have been shaken out and moved to more productive jobs. And why not? We need not compete with our neighbors to process agricultural and mineral products. Life is a dynamic process of continuous change. If we cannot move upwards, then we'll be overtaken. And it has been true for ancient tribes as it is true for modern nation states. Our economic strategy is simple. It is to be complementary within ASEAN and to be competitive worldwide. If we are just competitive within ASEAN, that's not good enough for us. We will perish because we haven't got the rice fields, the rubber, the tin, the bauxite, the hydroelectric power. Our future is in manufacturing to export in competition against all others on the world market. And an even bigger future for us is in what is the so-called brain services, especially computer software. Now, we didn't see this clearly in the 1950s and 60s. We thought we were competing with the Malaysians and the Indonesians for the same industries. We now know that there are enough different kinds of industries for all the 5 countries in ASEAN. And indeed, enough industries for all the countries of Asia if every country is objective and rational in recognizing its strong points, where it's got the comparative advantage, and its weak points, where it is at a comparative disadvantage. And in my recent discussions with the Malaysian PM and his deputy PM and his Minister for Home Affairs, I noted that they too had come to the conclusion, the same conclusion, as one minister put it, we are not going for the same bride. I thought he put it rather vividly. We are not chasing after the same girls. They have the advantage in agricultural commodities, minings and metals, and all the industries connected with them. We have to depend upon our strategic location, our infrastructure, our accumulated expertise, and an open, competitive environment for people, products, and ideas. Market forces will make our natural advantage in a strong economic and social infrastructure complement ASEAN's needs. For example, instead of making textiles to compete against textiles from Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, we now have SKF manufacturing textile machinery spare parts so we can sell them to all the textile factories in South and Southeast Asia. That's restructuring. The key is to have a vision of the future. And the masters are the Japanese. From my observations, my reading, and my experience meeting them, I think they are the nation most prepared for economic and political changes. Bereft of all natural resources, they are geared to restructure their economy, to maintain their people's well-being, and to undertake and discharge their nation's responsibility in the world. Of course, they have, in my view, one apparently blind sector, and that's security. Besides modest increases in defense, they appear content to stay under America's defense umbrella with just modest increases in annual defense expenditure. But it appears to be so. But it is not to be ruled out that there are defense thinkers and planners who can see what a dangerous world this will be by the end of the 1980s or the latter half of the 1980s, and they may well have to do something about it. But in all other respects, their publications show that they have rethought their problems through and worked out policies, new policies to meet new circumstances. Now, in June this year, a small team from our Ministry of Trade and Industry met a team from MITI in Tokyo. And they met other Japanese agencies too. Their report made absorbing reading for me. The Japanese are not harking back to an idyllic Japan of sailing ships and samurais. For the 1980s, their agenda is energy conservation and energy alternatives to oil. A strategy to overcome protectionism on steel, cars, electronic products by moving into what they have called creative knowledge industries. And I thought they put it very well. They are 0.3% of the population of the world. Their land area is 3% of the world's land area. Their GNP is 10% of the world's GNP. Now just think of the implications. 0.3% of the world's population, 3% of the world's land area, and they didn't even bother to say that 75% of that is mountains, but they produce 10% of the world's GNP. 0.3% of the world's population has 10% of the world's income. There's a lesson in it for us. Hitherto, they have done what the Americans and the Europeans derisively used to call reverse engineering. In other words, the Japanese were good imitators. They bought a product, broke it up, figured out how it was done, tried to copy it, never quite succeeded. Or so the Americans and Europeans thought. But they have succeeded. They have surpassed the Europeans in several products, and they are catching up with the Americans very fast in computers. Now they are geared for forward engineering. See, they got trapped in this terminology of reverse engineering. When I read it, I said, what's forward engineering? Because it didn't make sense to me. But of course, if you think of what they've been doing, copying, for the first time they are going to invent. They are going to discover. They're going to patent. They're going to give the world new products. And their vision of the 1980s, or Mitty's vision, by a very powerful team of thinkers, men of intelligence, wise men, industrialists, writers, economists, is a technology-based nation, a nation based on the continuous and continuing acquisition and exploitation of new knowledge to serve the need of men and societies. Now, other nations are also looking ahead, probing the future and planning how to meet it. And the French president recently commissioned two Inspecteurs du Finance to study the future implications of the computer. Now, let me explain Inspector du Finance. They are inspectors of finance, if you translate it into English. They are the top 10% of a top cream of 150 men each year who go or who get into École Nationale d'Administration, the National College for Administration, an advanced school for training high civil servants, the cream of the French intellectual elite. And if you are an Inspector du Finance, you are something like, in the Chinese imperial examinations, the Zhuangyuan and the next 14 names. Except that, of course, in China, there are probably 10 times as many people, and they hold their examinations once in 3 years. So if you are the Zhuangyuan, then of course you must be somebody quite remarkable. Whether you won a Nobel Peace Prize or not is irrelevant. If you can claim an ancestor who was a Zhuangyuan, that's something. Well, these two inspectors, one Simon Nora and the other Mink, reported to President Giscard d'Estaing, himself an Inspector des Finances, in January 1970, on what they call the telematic society. Is a bold word to describe the new age of computers. And they envision that the changes to the structure of human settlements and human societies will be as vastly different because of the computer and its multifarious uses in the home, in the offices, in the factories, in international communications, that there will be new forms of working and new styles of life, of living. People can stay where they like and plug into activity centers thousands of miles away and be completely with the mainstream of life. The structure, the nature, the arrangements for work, residence, and recreation of human societies will be totally altered. There will be a change almost in the molecular structure of society, so to speak. And these two inspectors du Finance warned the French, warned the president, that the Americans and the Japanese are way ahead in their research and development of the microchip and the endless uses of this microchip in the factory, the home, and throughout society. They urged the French to join and to catch up with those leaders in the new discoveries and take control of the users of these inventions and shape the regulations of the users, or they warn the French will be supplied by and under the control of those who are the discoverers and the masters of these new inventions. For they will settle the regulation of the user, and they will change the texture of the lives of people in France, in Europe, and the world. And as of now, there are only 2 European companies with any mark, with any niche in the computer or microchip market. 60% of that market, 59%, is American, 23% is Japanese. And the 2 European companies are Siemens of West Germany and Philips of Holland, with paltry portions of the balance. So you can imagine how startled I was when I read in the papers 2.5 weeks ago that the British Labour Party opposition leader responded to the call of his unions that he supported their demand for protectionism from foreign imports. They want to protect obsolescent industries to keep jobs for not very productive workers. These are the same union leaders who have fought to prevent the Times newspaper, the London Times, from using computer typesetting and closed it for more than nearly a year or year plus to save their jobs. And they are the same kind of union leaders that will probably succeed in permanently closing down the London Sunday Observer, which is being financed by an American oil company as one of his more altruistic projects. They want the world to stand still for them. And they are oblivious to the changes in this world. Now I say, surely there is a lesson in this for us, in these different responses to the challenge of change. Manchu China, under the Qing emperors, must have had the same death wish when they told the Western barbarians that their abundant Middle Kingdoms was so full of every luxury that they needed nothing from the West. And they needed no lessons on how to live. It ended in total collapse and degradation. The Japanese response to this challenge of Western technology was the Meiji Restoration in 1868. They decided that they were going to reorganize their feudal society to take in this new knowledge as fast as they could. They opened up Japan to trade and cultural intercourse. They learned, they imitated, they improved upon Western products. Now, in several fields, they are overtaking the West. I think there is, in Japanese society, an illustration in the Darwinian competition between societies for the survival of the fittest kind of society. the more resilient, the more adaptable the social organism, the more likely it is to survive. An interesting exchange took place between our MTI team and the Japanese MITI team. Our team argued that we shouldn't be classified as a newly industrializing country, or a NIC. And they pointed out the differences between us and Korea and Taiwan. No large land area, no large population. The Japanese have thought about these things. They not only think about their own future, they spend time thinking about what will be the future of their neighbors and the other parts of the world. And they said, yes, nevertheless, there were significant points worth noting. One, common elements in our development, sustained high growth, and not just in recent years, but accumulated over many years, and common elements in culture and civilization, which made us broadly fit into the NIC category. And they said, of course, different peoples were placed in different kinds of environment. And considering our environment, one role open to us for the future is that of a center of knowledge and information, similar to Tokyo's role. And to be such a center, the Japanese believed that reliability and trustworthiness of a people are most important. Let me pause there. Reliability and trustworthiness. We've been an entrepôt center for many years, for many decades. The merchant's word is his bond. As the Chinese would say, 一言有信用. You give your word, you don't break it. And I believe there is a place for us in this network, worldwide network of knowledge and information centers. And on this subject of data processing, I recall a fascinating conversation I had with a leading Japanese industrialist, head of a computer firm. We met in Tokyo in October last year. He explained to me that in future, there'll be more and more cheaper and cheaper computers. The hardware will be cheaper and cheaper, better and better. But the software, the program that has to teach the computer what to do is not easy to solve, because you need the human intelligence, and you can't just say, all right, produce so many people IQ 140. There's a limit, finite numbers in any population. And he said people good at mathematics must be found and trained to work out the systems and the programs to instruct the computer what to do. And he said, your people have a natural bent for mathematics. The Japanese are well informed. They make thorough investigations. They got branch offices all over the world. And they know who are good at mathematics. They are, amongst others. And he was delighted to discover that I was already a convert, because I too had been reading about the future of computers and how the curve shows the cost of hardware going this way and the cost of software going that way. And I told him that we were planning to teach computers and computer science in our schools. Secondary schools, junior colleges, and university. And he was delighted that the Japanese government had agreed to a Japan-Singapore Information Training Center. This is an ever-widening field of cooperation. We understand their strengths, their teamwork, and their dogged spirit. And they know that we are serious students of industrialization and modernization. And we want to learn from them. We want to learn from the Americans. We want to learn from the Europeans. But before we settle our vision of the 1990s and the 1980s, we got to settle the work attitudes of our workers. You can't reach out for the stars if you haven't got a sufficiently firm launching pad. And we shall, because it's a population that's responded. Each time we've campaigned, the Western press pokes fun at our campaigns. We try to be polite. We try to speak more Mandarins, less dialects. We try to keep the city clean. We punish recalcitrants by heavy fines. But we do make progress. And we've got to get it into the heads of our young workers that life is not a bed of roses. This generation has never known unemployment. I don't wish it upon them, but if we run into stormy weather, they'll get a dose of it sometime in the 1980s, and that may be very good for their souls. But let's try and educate them. Reason, logic, a package of incentives and disincentives, and social pressure, starting from the home, in the schools, in the workshops, with the full cooperation of the unions. Then we can concentrate our minds and our energies on acquiring the knowledge and expertise to be an information and a knowledge center. The future beckons to those who are looking out for these signals. If we hark back to the past, we shall miss these signals, and we shall not find our way to the niche that's waiting for us. And it's our job to get there. Good night. Thank you.